And welcome back, students. We are going to delve into input devices. Specifically, we're going to focus today on keyboards. So let's recall that an input device is something that takes user input and passes it as data to the computer, such as a mouse or keyboard. Today's lesson obviously being about the keyboard. All right. So we're going to start examining some of those input devices again in a bit more detail. And like I said, we're going to start with the keyboard first. So without further ado, the keyboard. All right. Let's start with the keyboard. It's a device we're very familiar with. I don't need to show a picture of it because I think almost every one of us know what a keyboard is. A keyboard typically has characters that are engraved or printed on the keys, or buttons really is what they are, and the press of each key typically corresponds to a single written symbol or some kind of function. Now the keyboard is used as a text entry interface in order to type text and numbers into things like a word processor, a text editor, or the interpretation of key presses, which is left to the software using the device. And the reason why I say the software using the device is because it might be a system command, or it could be a function that's mapped in like a video game. Really just kind of depends on what software is running. So let's talk about keyboard sizes. The first one to talk about is the standard keyboard size. Now desktop computer keyboards, such as the 101 key US traditional keyboards or 104 Windows keyboards, include things like alphanumeric characters, punctuation symbols, numbers, and a variety of different function keys. That would be like your F1, F2, F3, that sort of thing. Now, technically there's no standard computer keyboard, although many manufacturers imitate the keyboard of PCs. That's including Windows, Mac, etc. They kind of all follow the same kind of pattern. Now, there's actually three different PC keyboards. You have the original PC keyboard with 84 keys. You have a T keyboard, which also has 84 keys, and the enhanced with 101. Now, the three differ somewhat in the placement of the function keys, the control keys, return key, and shift key. So how those get arranged or presented are typically a little bit different. All right, next up is the laptop, such as the device I'm on right now. Now, keyboards on laptops and notebook computers usually have a shorter travel distance for the keystroke, shorter over travel distance, and a reduced set of keys, which means pretty much your keyboard is a lot more compact. They will typically omit the keys that you see on a desktop. For example, the numpad is one of the first things to typically go. And additionally, the spacing between the keys is also a lot smaller compared to that of a desktop. Now, as I already mentioned, they may not have a numerical keypad or a numpad, as it's often called, and the function keys may be placed in locations that differ from the placement on a standard full-size keyboard. Next, let's talk about flexible keyboards. These are a junction between a normal type, which is a full arrangement of keys, and a laptop type, which is a short key distant keyboard. So they're kind of a little bit of a hybrid. Additionally, the flexibility of them allows you to fold or roll the keyboard for better storage and transfer. So if you've ever seen one of these things, they're pretty cool because you can kind of literally just roll them up and off you go. You don't have to try and stack them, or they're not integrated into a device. However, because these keys are on a flexible surface, they have to be resting on a hard surface. So like a traditional keyboard, because it's on a rigid piece of plastic, you can set it on your lap and off you go, or you can set it on a desk and off you go. Flexible keyboard, you wouldn't be able to put that on your lap very effectively because, well, it would literally contour to the shape of your lap. Now, the vast majority of flexible keyboards in the market are made from silicone, right? Which is a nice thing because it makes them water and dust resistant. So it's a lot easier to keep them clean than, per se, a traditional USB plastic keyboard. Next is the software keyboard. And we're probably very familiar with these because these are also known as on-screen keyboards, and they often take the form of computer programs to display an image of a keyboard on the screen. So like when you're typing for a text message, for example, and you go to type a text message in, this is an example of a software keyboard. Another input device such as mouse or touchscreen can be used to operate each virtual key to enter text. So if you had, for example, a stylus, you could use that to touch each letter, or you can use your finger to touch each letter. Or if you have a mouse, you could, and you're using, like, let's say, a tablet that's integrated in, you could use the on-screen keyboard there as well. Now, software keyboards have become very popular in touchscreen-enabled things like cell phones due to the additional cost space requirements of other hardware keyboards. So if you were to put in a physical keyboard, it's going to cost a lot more money because you have to have additional circuitry, whereas a software keyboard can be emulated and also gives you more screen size. Now, with the click of a letter, the software is able to write the respective letter on the respective spot of what you're trying to type. Next, let's talk about projected keyboards. And if you've never seen a projected keyboard in action, I really suggest you do a quick YouTube video and look at projected keyboards. They're really kind of futuristic and pretty cool. Now, projection keyboards project typically an image of keys, usually with like a laser, onto a flat surface. So literally, if this, let's say this laptop had a projection keyboard, it would project an image of a keyboard, and then I could just simply start typing on my desk where it was at in order to create a keyboard. Now, the device uses a camera or infrared sensor to watch where the user's fingers move, and will count a key is being pressed when it sees, quote unquote, the user's finger touch the projected image. So it's all just a big series of sensors that's in action here. Now, projection keyboards can simulate a full-size keyboard from a very small projector, because it doesn't need to have to be a huge, high-quality image. Now, because these keys are simply projected images, you have no feeling when they're touched. Even a flexible keyboard has some level of give to it. Or if you're using an on-screen keyboard, even though you're not physically touching the keys, because you're striking a surface that your brain registers as something that's different, it registers as a press for you. However, when people use projected keyboards, they often experience increased discomfort in the fingertips because of the lack of that give when you're typing, because you start smashing your fingers down like you're using a traditional keyboard, but it doesn't have that same give because it's literally just the surface of whatever you're typing on. So if it's a hard countertop, you're going to strike your fingers, and eventually they're going to start getting kind of sore because of that hard countertop. Now, a flat, non-reflective surface is also required for this type of device because typically if you have a reflective surface, your sensors are going to have a harder time picking up the different keystrokes that you're trying to do. All right, let's discuss really quickly keyboard layout. There are a number of different arrangements of alphabetic, numeric, and punctuation symbols on keys. These different keyboard layouts arise mainly because different people need easy access to different symbols, either because they're inputting text in a different language, or because they need a specialized layout for things like mathematics, accounting, computer programming, or some other kind of purpose. Additionally, the common QWERTY keyboard layout that we're all very familiar with was designed in the early era of mechanical typewriters. So its ergonomics were compromised to allow for the mechanical limitations of the typewriter. So that's the reason why a QWERTY keyboard is actually not necessarily best designed for ergonomic per function. So that's why a lot of people complain about cramps and stuff like that over time, because a QWERTY keyboard is not designed for that. There are other keyboards which are better designed to handle common keystrokes and stuff like that. Just QWERTY has become the dominant one. Now, when QWERTY was designed, like I said, it wasn't designed for ergonomics. It was designed to reduce typewriter jamming, because that's how long this has been around as a standard of keyboards. Now, the layout was adopted for computers because it was adopted for electronic keyboards, which were widely used. So remember, there's mechanical typewriters, and then they had electric typewriters, and so then it was just a natural jump to make a computer keyboard. Just because the familiarity was there, this is why they kept it, even though there is no longer that need for reducing the jam. Now, there are alternative layouts, such as Dvorak's Simplified Keyboard. However, these layouts typically don't find widespread use. They're usually pretty niche in the people that use them, and so you don't necessarily see that as often. All right, next let's talk about some key types. The first, of course, is the alphanumeric. Alpha meaning letters and numeric meaning numbers. Alphabetical, numeric, and punctuation keys are used to enter the respective symbol into a word processing program, a text editor, data spreadsheet, or any other program. Now, many of these keys will produce different symbols when the modifier or shift keys are also pressed. For example, the alphabetic characters will become uppercase when the shift key or caps lock key is depressed. The numeric characters become symbols or punctuation marks when the shift key is depressed. And the alphabetic, numeric, and punctuation keys can also have other functions when they are pressed at the same time as some modifier keys, such as if you're going to do an alt code. If you hold down alt and you press a series of numbers, it will change over to a symbol or maybe some function. Now, the space bar, of course, is a horizontal bar that's in the lowermost row, which is significantly wider than most keys. Obviously, this is something we're very familiar with, but the main purpose of the space bar is to enter a space between words during typing. It is large enough so a thumb from either hand can find it easily, and in computer games and other apps, the key has a myriad of uses in addition to its normal purpose in typing, such as jumping and adding marks to checkboxes. In certain programs also for playback digital video, the spacebar is typically used for things such as pausing and resuming playback. Next, let's talk about modifier keys. Modifier keys are special keys that modify the normal action of another key when the two keys are pressed in combination. For example, if I press Alt F4 in Microsoft Windows, it will close the program in an active window. By themselves, modifier keys usually do nothing. So if I just press Alt right now on my keyboard, it's not going to do much. The computer will recognize that Alt's been pressed, but it's not going to do anything because it's waiting for a second key or third key to be pressed. The most widely used modifier keys typically include things like the Control key, Shift key, or the Alt key. Now, on things like Mac and Apple keyboards, the modifier keys are replaced with the Option or Command key, respectively. And the reason why I say Macintosh and Apple is because the symbols that were there have changed over time. For Windows keyboards, there is often the Windows key, which, of course, I have a Windows device right now, so I have a Windows key on my keyboard. And also, your more smaller compact keyboards, such as laptops, will have a FN or a function key. Sometimes full-size ones may have it too. It just kind of depends. Now, the enter-return key typically causes a command line, window, form, or dialog box to operate its default function, which is typically to finish an entry and begin the desired process. In word processing applications, pressing the enter key typically will end a paragraph and then start a new one. All right, cursors. Navigation keys or cursor keys include a variety of keys which move the cursor to different positions on the screen. You probably never knew that they were called cursor keys, but here they are. So you have things such as your arrow keys, which are programmed to move the cursor in a specified direction, such as up, down, left, right. You have page scroll keys, such as page up and page down, which will scroll the page up or down. You have the home key, which is returning the cursor to the beginning of the line where the cursor is located. The end key, which puts the cursor at the beginning of the line. The tab key advances the cursor to the next tab stop. The insert key, which is mainly used to switch between overtype mode, in which the cursor overrides any text, and insert mode, where the cursor inserts a character at its current position. We have the delete key, which discards the character ahead of the cursor position, moving all the characters one position back. And the backspace key, which simply just deletes the preceding character. Now you also have these things called lock keys. Lock keys lock up part of a keyboard depending on which settings are selected. Most styles of keyboards have 3 LEDs which indicate which locks are enabled in the upper right corner above the numeric pad. If you don't have a numeric pad, you might have an indicator like someplace else. So for example, like this laptop, if I press caps lock right now, I get a symbol that pops up on my screen to indicate to me, hey, caps lock is on. And when I press it again, it shuts it off. The lock keys include things such as typically scroll lock, num lock, which allows the use of the numeric keypad, and caps lock. Scroll lock, if you're not sure what that does, that keeps you from using like page up and page down functions. All right, next we have system commands. The print screen command used to capture the entire screen and it puts a screenshot onto your clipboard. You have the break key or pause key, which is no longer really having a defined purpose. It's kind of one of those keys that you might still see on your keyboard, but doesn't necessarily find a use. Most modern keyboards, the break key is usually labeled, as pause/break. In most Windows environments, the key combinations of the Windows key and pause brings up system properties. So if you hold on the Windows key and then press pause, boom, up comes your system properties. Now the escape key is something that we should be familiar with, which is often abbreviated ESC, is used to initiate an escape sequence. It is used as a shortcut in dialog boxes for things such as no, quit, exit, cancel, or abort. The enter key, which we kind of already mentioned, I'm sure you've heard about, is something that is both in the alphanumeric keys and in the numpad. Now, it's a function of a key which is used to create space for enough paragraph. I mean, I've already mentioned the enter key, but it also falls here under system command key because of its role in not just typing, but also in things like running code and things like command prompts, so line editing, stuff like that. Then we have the shift key. When one presses a shift in a letter, it will capitalize the letter with the shift key, Another use is to type more symbols than appear to be available, such as if you have your numpad, or not your numpad, but your number row on the top of your keyboard. You have the symbols like exclamation point, at, pound, $, percent, all those. Holding shift will allow you to access those symbols. All right, real quick, let's talk about connections. Keyboards are often connected via PS2 or USB. If you remember what I talked about, PS2 is not as well supported anymore. Most keyboard connections are typically by USB or they are wireless, which have become fairly popular actually because you increase user freedom. You don't have to be tethered to a cable. You can pick up the keyboard and you can go sit across the room and use the keyboard. Now, a wireless keyboard also includes a required combination transmitter and receiver unit that attaches to the computer's keyboard port. Typically, you'll see it'll have a wireless RF module that you'll plug into one of your USB ports, and then you'll have your keyboard will have a transmitter on it that will broadcast to that. Now, the wireless aspect is achieved either by radio frequency, which I already mentioned, RF, or it's going to use infrared signals, IR, which are sent and received from both the keyboard and the unit attached to the computer. Now, there isn't one other option, and if they don't want to use that, they could also use Bluetooth. However, Bluetooth, you run into a lot of security potential issues. So, if you have any kind of interference that might interfere with the Bluetooth signal, that could be another thing. Keystroke logging. Unencrypted wireless Bluetooth keyboards are known to be vulnerable to signal theft by placing a covert listening device in the same room as the keyboard to sniff and record Bluetooth back for the purpose of logging keys typed by the user. So there's one more reason to kind of avoid a wireless Bluetooth keyboard, because if you're really worried about sensitive information, you probably shouldn't be using Bluetooth. Keystroke logging, or often just known as key logging, is a method of capturing and recording the user keystrokes. It is also used by hackers for various illegal or malicious acts such as obtaining passwords or encryption keys to bypass other security measures. Keystroke logging can be achieved by both hardware and software means. So it could either be like a dongle that got attached to a computer someplace and is capturing all the input that passes the machine, or it could be a piece of software, which would mean it's just a malware that's on your computer and is capturing that input. All right, physical injury. We're chugging through this, folks. Let's get going. The use of any keyboard may cause serious physical injuries, such as carpal tunnel syndrome or other repetitive strain injury to things such as your hands, your wrists, your arms, your neck, or your back. Now, the risk of injuries can be reduced by taking frequent short breaks to get up and walk around a couple times every hour. So that means pry yourself away from your computer, get up, and just go for a walk. Boom, done. Now, users should vary their tasks of the day to avoid overuse of the hands and wrists. Notice you don't want to be sitting there typing at your keyboard for 8 hours. You should be able to do, maybe a little bit of browsing, maybe a little bit of something else. You don't want to simply just keep doing the same repetitive task. When inputting at the keyboard, a person should also keep the shoulders relaxed with the elbows at the side, with the keyboard and mouse positioned so that reaching is not necessary. Sometimes this can be hard to achieve depending on the furniture you have available, or even your own body size in relation to the furniture that's provided. Because if you're a person who's short or really tall, you may have issues sitting properly at furniture that's at a predefined height. Now, the chair height and keyboard tray should be adjusted so the wrists are straight and the wrists should not be rested on sharp table edges. Again, if you can adjust it, great. But one thing you should watch out for is just saying here about sharp table edges. You want to make sure that if you're going to set your arms on the table, that it's on something softer and not on something that is going to, cause you a lot of pinching, because that can actually, pinch off nerves. It could, cut off blood circulation, so that can lead to damage. Wrist or palm rest should not be used while typing. So, you can get things that you can actually rest your wrist on or your palms. But if you're going to be engaging in typing, that's actually not what those are meant to be used for. Those are supposed to be meant for when you're not doing something. You can rest your hand there, not actively while you're typing. And when you're typing, you're actually supposed to kind of have your arm almost in like a hover. Anyone that's ever played piano is very familiar with this. You kind of have to have that proper form. Same thing goes here with typing. Now, some adaptive technologies, ranging from special keyboards, mouse placements, and pen tablet interfaces to speech recognition software can take steps to reduce the risk of injury. All right, folks, we finally made it through those notes. It's quite a doozy, but that's it for now on keyboards. So when we come back next time, we'll do our next